Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Marketing Mondays. My name is Ira Bowman. I'm happy to be your host, and I'm also excited today to be joined by Everet Bluth, who is going to talk about talent optimization in some ways that I frankly have never heard of before. And I'm excited because whenever I hear something new, I think, ooh, my audience is going to be interested too. So Everet, welcome. He's joining us from Dallas, Texas area. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ira.
Yeah, so I'm excited to have you here. We met on in a networking event for High Rise Networks, which I'm excited about. That it's a interesting organization and to give us lots of opportunities to meet new people. And I'm happy to have met you there.
Well, likewise, Ira. It's been fun. I know we crossed paths a couple times at High Rise, and I'm glad to be here. I'm fascinated with what you do. Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's a little bit different, right? I mean, I talk to people who are experienced or more experienced than me in business, and they go, "What are you doing on social media? How does it all work?" So we could talk about that too. Welcome, Miracle. She's joining us from Nigeria. It's one of the things that's exciting about this show is it is global. I have people from all over the world. We come to you live from Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So we simulcast on all three, and then for those of you who ever miss an episode, you can find all the episodes. The previous episodes are hosted live, or not live, but after the fact on Bowman Digital Media. So you can join. And if you're watching the show and you want to know how to get a hold of Everet or any of my previous guests, if you click on the video, I have a backlink to their websites inside. So there's a little housekeeping for us there. But Everet, go ahead if you don't mind. Just let us know, maybe 2 minutes. For those of you who are not familiar with Everet, I am going to put his LinkedIn profile like I do week in and week out. So this is Everet right here. It says talent optimization. I'm going to post the link as Everet. If you can do like maybe 2-minute intro just for people who aren't familiar with you so they know who you are.
Sure. Everet at IRI. It's the name of my company. I'm a data research guy by training and passion, but I happened to go to work for a consulting company about 25 years ago that was in the HR space, human resource management and talent. So that's how I got into the space. At the time, and then even since then, we've done mostly employee opinion surveys, different types of ways to get employee feedback about their, job experience, their experience on the job with their manager, their careers and things like that. And I've always been fascinated by things that are deeper than just that kind of feedback. So here a while back, I kind of accidentally came across another approach. Talent optimization, as the name is given, where it's more data driven. And I think it digs deeper into the heart and mind of the individual, which really, really can play a big role in how successful anyone is in the job that they take. So,
yeah, the data-driven part is the part that fascinates me about this, right? So you have a marketing component now to talent optimization. And we're going to get into this. We've got 60 minutes to talk about it. Well, we've got 55 more minutes, but anyways, who's counting? We've got some time. We're going to delve into it, but let's talk about this first. You and I were talking in the green room a little bit about going from, employee to business owner, and that happened to both of us. It happened to me back in 2020. I'm not sure how long you've been at the helm of IRI before, you were just an employee there or a consultant there. But I think for those of you who are watching, the thing that is interesting about Everett and my story both is we didn't actually spend a ton of money. We didn't go broke getting in. So if you think that you have to like spend millions of dollars or go in, underwater in debt to do it, you don't have to. So Everett, if you want to just kind of share that story a little bit, I think that could be an encouragement to people.
Sure. And I'm going to go back and even a little farther where, the whole
Yeah.
thing about where you end up in your job, is it, random? Is it chance? Is it planned? It depends. But I actually ended up with this company, not so much because of my original training, but more so because I was trying to keep up on my ability to speak Spanish. So I looked for a side job
Okay.
to try to keep using my Spanish. And I answered this little ad in the newspaper that said, "We need someone with a computer who speaks Spanish for part-time work." And so that's what I did. And I did, private contract on the side for a couple of years. And then the owner called me up and said, "I've got a job, that position here in my company that nobody else here wants." At least he kind of facetiously cast it that way. And so I joined him
Right.
and looked at it, and it was a lot of data. They do surveys and, in the employee opinion space. This is back in the mid 90s. Then I joined that company as the director of, if you want to call it, we didn't use fancy titles, but I
Right.
had responsibility for all the analytics and the survey work. So, and in 2011, 2009 is when I actually took the company. Okay, things changed,
Oh yeah.
dynamics
Yeah.
changed. So it was 2009. It was a bit of a, risk. You could see that, but it was not, a huge risk in terms of finances. We had a good client base and uh, already established revenue stream, which we were able to grow. So previous
Well,
owner decided he wanted to go do something else, and so I kept the flag flying and off, and we're still here. So
I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile right now. You went to BYU.
yes,
So
sir.
that's cool. My mom lives in the heart of Utah.
Oh,
This little tiny town 100 miles south of Salt Lake City. So 45 miles south of BYU in Provo there. It's called Levan. And no one's ever heard of it, and they shouldn't because it's like 500 people. But anyways, so the thing there always in Utah is, it's there's two schools that people fight about. It's like,
yeah.
right. So it's the U for Utah, University of Utah, right? And then
I
it's
don't know why.
BYU.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the Y. So it's the U or the Y. Anyways, and then you got a master's degree at TCU, so you got some really good schooling uh, in your background there, and then you worked for TI, Texas Instruments, which it's a small world because my father-in-law worked for TI too.
Oh,
So
okay.
you might have known him back in the day. And then the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. That's an interesting. You don't see a lot of people who actually work for the Federal Reserve.
No. Okay. And a lot of people really don't know a lot about the role the Fed plays in our lives.
100% true,
Yeah, some
which
people
is
think.
sad because it is a big factor.
Yeah, so some people. I'll say this at the risk of, some people forming opinions, but the good, our leaders in DC, they're very powerful, but when the Fed changes things, it impacts us all, I think, on a wider
Yeah,
scale, particularly in the pocket. But no, that was a fascinating job.
yeah.
My background is analytics and statistics, and so I worked there, did a tour of duty at TI as an analyst in the manufacturing world, and I switched to the Fed. It was kind of an internal project company, business or department. We called ourselves operations analysis, but we did all sorts of operation studies, logistics studies, just anything senior management needed to do some, due diligence on, and that required an analytical dive into the issue. And
So so you're a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets are fun for you, right?
spreadsheets are the heart of the business. Any other toy or tool that will let you turn data and find a story, there's plenty out there. So yeah, that'll light my eyes up any day. Okay.
Yeah, no, I got you. I'm trying to let the audience know who they're talking to. Like when it comes to analyzing data, you're right up there with maybe the most qualified person I've had on the show. So And then
what I'll put, I'll say have all the bruises and scars that come along with that. So I guess that's one way to look at it.
yeah. Well, but you've done director of ops. That's, the first role that's listed on your LinkedIn is director of ops for IRI, and then senior vice president of operations and data analytics, and then moving into your current position as CEO, starting in 2009. So you've got tons of experience. So let me do this. Let me pull up for the people who are not familiar with IRI, because I frankly wasn't. And in fact, I'm going to do something here live on the show because I want to encourage other people to do it as well. So what I want you guys to do, I'm going to post this on the LinkedIn page here. Find IRI here. So I just posted that link, okay, on the LinkedIn comments page, because this is the LinkedIn here. But this is what I want you guys to do. Do me a favor, hit this follow button, because if you're interested in this conversation, which I believe you all are going to be, it's going to be fascinating what he's doing with the information and how he's helping businesses to improve their employee base, not only now, but into the future, right? By optimizing talent. That's what they do. Well, he's going to explain how. But follow his company, because you're going to get content that you're not going to get, I don't think, really anywhere else. So follow him there. And then if you want more information, of course, I will share this in a minute too. This is the website. We'll come back to it. But make sure you guys hit that follow button for me. That'll be a blessing to Everet, and I think it'll be a blessing to you too when you go and you figure out what it is they're posting. And well, no posts yet. Everet, we gotta get some posts.
Well, I always put them over on my personal profile. That's the one I'm more familiar with.
You and I'll talk about that off camera. I can help you out. All right. Follow his page. Encourage Everett to start making some posts on his company page. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I should have looked. Like I said, I should have looked. Anyways, but I'm following you now. All right.
I'll take anybody that I can. Okay.
And he's got a website, folks, so we can follow him there too. But let's talk about this a little bit. IRI, if you had to give like the 30,000 foot view, because we'll start up high and then we'll work our way in. What is it that you do and who is it that you help? So two-part question, just from the 30,000 foot view, what you do and who you help.
Okay. IRI's history really goes back to when employee opinion surveys and employee feedback was probably the exception. This goes way back. And at the time, the owner of the company recognized the need for that through his own experiences. So the whole gist of what we do now is give employees a voice about their experience on the job. So from the 30,000 foot view, that would be the headline. 40 years ago, it was like the mindset was mostly, well, yeah, you should be happy to have a job.
Right.
Okay. And that probably still prevails in some cultures, depending on the company. But over the years, I think it's unfolded that the customer is important. And that's always been the focus of strategies and business objectives and things like that. But I think nowadays, especially with the last 18 months and maybe the previous decade, but who's between the owner and the customer? It's the employee.
Yeah.
And so technically there's an employer has two customers. One is his employee base and the other is his actually customer. So striking the balance of serving both is a challenge for any company. And from my own personal experience of running my own business, I prefer to, defer to my employees because they're not here. My customers aren't going to get served. So that's what this company has always done. That's kind of been the mindset is what is the job experience? How does that information flow back to leadership? How do you get reliable feedback in a confidential manner so that people and employees can be honest in their feedback? And then how do you, drill through all that data? How do you cipher through all that information and pull out the nuggets that will make a difference in the everyday life of your employees?
Okay, so you're helping owners communicate with their employees better. That's one of the things I just pulled out of that answer. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I've seen it read or written in other papers about that conversation, and what do you call a corporate conversation, if you want to call it that. that's one way to do it, is through an employee opinion survey, some feedback. There's many other ways to do that nowadays with technology, but the one that we've found is among the most effective is that annual experience of an employee saying, okay, here's how I feel about this, and this. And there's specific questions you can put on there depending on what the company wants to know. You can leave a lot of open-end options for feedback. So it's a technology has really blown this into a very, very powerful way to, for the leadership team to get ongoing, real time, or periodic, depending on what they're wanting or what they need, for employees to actually open up, if they will, and share their thoughts, their ideas, see where things are going well, seeing kind of where some issues may not be, and what business practices need to change or be adjusted to help make sure that employees have an environment they feel safe in, that they can be productive in. And hopefully the end game is to keep them, because it's a whole lot cheaper to keep an employee than replace them, both in terms of time and cost. So
I tell people that all the time. In fact, most people don't realize this, but it takes about a year to onboard an employee. It's a really expensive process. So if you have employees if you hire the wrong ones, that's a problem. So you need to make sure that your recruiting process is good. And I've talked to a lot of recruiters and HR professionals and business owners about that. But what you just said is also true employee retention. Then once you have the right ones and they're onboarded, keeping them happy will save your company a lot of headaches and expenses down the road. But also, to your specific point, what you're doing here, talking about how to optimize the talent that you have to get better results, that's also a key to a business succeeding. So I'm just fascinated how this is going to close the loop in a lot of ways, because I've talked to the recruiters and the business owners and the HR folks about getting the right folks in their process of how they hire and the ATS and all this stuff. But then for you, now you're talking to the business owner about, okay, this is your stable of employees. Is everybody in the right seat? Is everybody happy? How do you keep them happy? Well, this is the perception now. And it maybe the owners, there's problems. I'm sure we're going to talk about this too. Problems that they're commonly unaware of. That is an easy fix. It doesn't even necessarily take a lot of money. It's just maybe some philosophy changes or strategy changes, so they can keep people happier and keep them there longer. We'll get into all of that. But I just think it's fascinating that most people don't necessarily even think about talent optimization. They just assume, like you said, 40 years ago, just do your job. You're happy. You're lucky to have a job. And I remember that mentality. I had that mentality as an employee for a while. When I started my career, I was just excited they hired me, and I was excited to get a paycheck, and I would have done whatever they asked me to do in my naivete. But anyways, we got some more people joining the show. We got VJ from Chicago area. I was going to try to say NUJ, but I don't know if it's news or NUJ. But anyways, and then also you've got a couple new followers now. Miracle followed your company page, and Mariella also followed your company page. So you got at least 3 new ones.
Yeah, I'm starting out here. This whole new social media.
We'll try to get you a few more. And maybe what you do is make your first post like, hey, Ira encouraged me to make a post on his show, and thanks for watching and following, something like that. It could be something lighthearted. And then we got a comment from Mariella. I just wanted to put it up here. And if you guys have questions for Everet along the journey, feel free to ask. This is it's an open dialogue. So, you can ask us questions anytime. But Mariella says, and as my grandma taught me, each and every employee is the ambassador of your company.
Very true.
I think there are people who forget that. I think I've worked for a few companies that have forgotten that. But one of the things about being in sales, you and I were talking before the show started, I have a 20-year plus background in business to business sales. And we always understood that we were ambassadors for the company. Customer service, obviously, ambassadors for the company. But I say every single employee is an ambassador for your company somewhere along the journey. So it's good to take care of them, employers. And it's also good to understand how they think and feel, so that you can make sure they're happy. All right.
No, that's a
So
good point.
we got a response from Brady. Now this is up your wheelhouse here because our company does quarterly QDCs, and I don't know what that QDC acronym stands for. Maybe you do. If you do, you can fill us in. Oh, here he tells us. All right. I love it when people explain what
Okay.
acronyms are. Thank you so much. Quarterly development conversations.
Hadn't heard that one, but I understand what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean everybody's got. This is what I try to explain to people on LinkedIn, especially when you're using acronyms, and if you don't explain them, it's a good illustration of it. You you know what it means. You'd probably just assume everybody knows what it means, but a lot of us have no idea. It's like we get lost in the acronyms. So I tell people, make sure you spell it out because you're dealing with a lot of people on LinkedIn who are not in your particular field, no
Right.
matter what field you're in. I'm in marketing, which is pretty general, but even still, a lot of people, like I use terms like SEO and DA for domain authority and search engine optimization, and I assume everybody knows what that means, but I know a lot of people now don't, and so that's why I even have to spell
Hmm.
it out too, right? So
Well, I'm going to write that one down, QDCs, because I haven't heard that one, but I understand what it is. Okay.
there we go. All right,
Yeah.
so let's do this. We talked about kind of from a 30,000 foot view how you are helping your clients. Now let's talk a little bit about, again, at the 30,000 foot level, who you're helping. Like, what kind of companies do you have a specialty niche, or I mean, is it general, but maybe size, vertical market, area? It could be any, if you want to address any or all of those.
Sure. Actually, any industry can benefit from this. Okay. Most of our experience is in the food retail. We've done a lot of experience in hospitality, some in the medical field, engineering, done quite a bit of work in the manufacturing world, which, all these have their little different cultures and nuances based on their, the operation and the demands on skills and, what skills do they need and things like that. So I've had experience in probably most industries except maybe cosmetics. Okay. As far as the big ones go, as far as size of the company, the bigger it is, obviously, the more complex it is to build something that's effective and comprehensive enough to bring back, uh, to obtain useful information and bring it down to the, a level that's actionable, which is another aspect that I think is a challenge, is actually doing something with the information in there. So,
So what size would that be? Would it be like 50 employees, 10 employees, 100 employees?
well, for an engagement survey, if you're under 50 people, it's probably not going to be
There's
a
not
good
much. Yeah.
investment because, even 75, maybe even 100, depending on your culture and what it is. Because if you're down that small, you ought to be talking to each other anyway. Okay. You ought to be doing these QDCs verbally, as whatever sense, whatever makes
So
most sense.
a hundred or more, pretty much.
Yeah, the further away, one way to look at it is the further away an employee is from, say, for example, maybe the next level up of management, not
Hmm.
necessarily as immediate manager, but the next level up is
Hmm.
probably one way to look at it. So the further away they get from that, it makes
Yeah.
a lot more sense to invest in some sort of a feedback mechanism or a
So
feedback
you've
program.
got an army of inside sales and customer service reps and production folks. Then there's a shift manager, there's a department manager, there's a
Right,
director,
right,
there's a C-suite, and then there's right. You're talking about a tree like that,
right.
loosely,
Yeah.
right? Okay, I
So
got you.
if your company is small enough to where you don't have all those layers, then it may not be the best investment. But if you get
You-
bigger and bigger and there's a lot more broader perspective, a lot more different kinds of employees, then it gets a little more of a challenge to get that feedback in a way you can actually digest and draw insights from that can be productive and helpful
So
in changing it.
another part of this then would also be multiple locations, right? So if you
Yeah,
have one shop that has 75 people or 100 people, but it's all a single location and everybody has an opportunity to walk into the owner's office equally, then that's
right.
probably not the best fit. But if you got three locations, maybe you're in Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston, or maybe Austin, whatever. Anyways, and
Yeah,
they don't have equal access now. Maybe you start to see that. What about? And this is probably my first curveball for you today. But what about a company that acquires a competitor? maybe they're not quite at 100, but they acquire a competitor. Now you have at least two locations because you have the original and the one you acquired, but you also now have different cultures
Mhm.
and you have a formal rivalry that now you're supposed to, kumbaya and everybody's, on the same page. So
Yeah, that's a great question, and we've done a couple of projects like that. We had a manufacturing firm that was kind of got out in front of that because of their experiences. As soon as they acquired a new division that was blended in with their strategy, the first thing they want to go do is a survey. Of course, they've learned a lot through their own negotiations, but really they haven't talked to the people. And so they would use that as a method to do two things, really. There's probably a lot, but the two general ones was first, like you said, what do we buy and who are we trying to blend into our family and what are the challenges there? And number two, it sends the message to the new entity that, hey, as a new owner, a new leadership core, we are serious about you and we really care about your experience. So just the mere act of asking sends a message to that new group. And then, of course, depending on the dynamics, you might get something that's fairly straightforward, or you might end up with, call it a can of worms, and we got to let us straighten the stuff out. But that would be a natural course to go through in an acquisition. And now at least you have your arms around some of the issues.
yeah.
You can respond to them. But yeah, in that sense,
So
it makes logic.
these surveys, when you're doing these surveys, and we need to get into this a little bit so that people understand what it is you're doing and how they work. So let's just start to talk about the minutia of the surveys themselves. So you generate a list of questions. Is there a general rule of thumb, or is every situation different? So like you can expect to have 20 questions or 100 questions, or is
Yeah.
that a standardized thing, or is that just every
Well,
case has its own answer?
well, we have a standard set that we use, and it's not so much. There are specific questions, but it's more about the bigger factors. So there are some known things that research has proven out over the years. Despite the differences in companies and cultures, we're all basically human, and we all kind of have the same basic needs from our jobs. Okay, so the nature of what you ask across different companies and different industries, the general topics don't vary a whole lot. The specifics of the question depends on the company, the terminology, put it in their language so that they
Sure.
understand
What
when
ca-
you get back.
what
And
what kind of topics are we talking about? Let's air it
well,
out.
I'll give you the general categories that you typically see on an engagement survey like this. One is, the immediate relationship between you and your immediate boss.
Mhm.
That's where the key issue is. In my experience, most business issues, be they HR or something related to HR, can often be traced back to that dynamic. Okay. The other is their perception of leadership. Okay. What's the company culture?
So leadership as a whole. So you've got your direct line
Right.
boss, and then you've got the leadership as a whole. Okay, so
Then you
there's
got your senior leadership that sets the tone and directs the strategies and things like that. That's another section. The other is career interests. Are you meeting? Are my career interests being met?
mhm.
Okay. And do I have what I need to do my job? That's kind of related to the manager, but sometimes those are out of his control. But so, what do I need do I have the tools I need to do my job? And then, of course, is it meeting my personal needs? Financially, emotionally, if you want to call it that. Does it fit my family situation? Uh, so those are some of the general categories: the compensation side, the leadership side, my
Let me
manager
make
and I, things like that.
let me make sure I got this right. I'm trying to summarize your answers as you go. So I've got survey topics. Just these are okay. Again, guys, this is 30,000-foot view. Every case is going to be a little bit different depending on the situation. But we're talking in general. You're going to have a manager question, leadership question, career path question, tools to do the job type question, and a finance question. So 5 pillars.
Right.
Okay.
And
All
then
right.
within each of those, there's anywhere from 4 to 5 detailed questions about those dynamics that kind of drill deeper down into how a company is performing in those areas. So
Now, is that
you might end up with a questionnaire, ideally somewhere between 25 and 35 questions. If you go beyond that, you run a risk of losing a lot of people. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
Check, 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 check. Or am I really going to think about it? So that's
Are
that's kind
we
of the ideal place to be.
now? I'm assuming these are delivered electronically now.
Most of them are these days, but I happen to have the project that fell in my lap last August that I actually went out and did a paper survey. So that's still around.
All right. So we still got some dinosaurs out there. All right.
Yeah.
When a company hires you and you're doing a survey, is this something that you work with them, like the upper management, to craft these questions, or do you try to figure out what it is that they're trying to accomplish and then create the questions kind of like a double blind where they don't even know what the questions are going to be? Is it one of those things where they're involved in the shaping of the questions or no?
Oh yes, of course. It's they're the customer. They're going to tell. They know what their needs are, and we'll go through our standard set and customize it. Maybe add a few things, take a few things out that may not be relevant to their situation. Sometimes they'll have a specific issue that's on their mind. Okay, that you could attack or go at to directly. But in our experience, you're better off asking a broader base of questions with that embedded within the context of the survey, because in most instances, there's also related issues. So it's not just one factor in the HR world and in human behavior. Everything is highly related. So if you've changed one aspect of the business, it's going to impact somewhere else in terms of the people impact. So we try to broaden the survey enough to get you related issues, maybe bigger picture, and maybe even uncover some things that you didn't even really know you're dealing with or are out there that could raise their heads later.
Well, let's talk about this a little bit. So you've got a lot of companies have multiple departments, right? They could have 3, they could have 10, they could have 25. I mean, it depends on the size of the business, obviously, but there can be many departments. So I'm assuming that these results are blind, so you don't know the person who's actually filling out the individual responses, right? So they can be free to respond honestly. I'm assuming that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But are you somehow denoting the department level? So like if you have somebody says immediate manager is a problem, they can go, okay, well, these departments where we're getting that response is, inside sales or customer service or,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
production or whatever. You know what I mean? Is it like that, or there's no identifier to department 2 so that they have to go back and kind of maybe figure it out?
Well, a lot of it depends. That depends on the size of your company. And the first point, confidentiality, yeah, that is paramount. If
Yeah. Yeah, I was
we,
going to
we
say
go, we go
nobody's going to want to answer honestly if
yeah,
there's
in
any
fact,
chance of retribution, right?
yeah, and that's one with the the plethora of survey tools out there. I think a lot of companies are trying to do it themselves,
Yeah.
and some can be successful with that depending on how you approach it. Others, third party is probably the best solution because it's an independent perspective.
Yeah.
We work and guarantee that confidentiality. Okay, we don't get too close to the individual. In fact, we don't get close to the individual answer at all. But we do try to structure the data so that you can drill down to uncover the hot spots and even the bright spots.
Well, I think for the employees, from the employees' perspective, now I'm talking to you business owners. If you're trying to do this internally with your own in-house survey, they're going to be highly suspect that there is no reproach because it's not all that complicated to figure out who answered what. Having a third party just adds instant credibility that this is going to be a true confidential process and gives employees confidence to answer honestly. So I do think just straight out of the gate, this would be hard to do realistically to get to trust the results as an employer. You're going through this exercise. If you want to trust the results, I'm going to say probably doing it yourself or having your HR people do it is not the smartest way to get real answers if you want real answers, right? I mean, I certainly would have never answered in a survey critically if it was done internally because
Mhm.
I would be nervous that it could come back to bite me.
Yeah, there's that is still a very prevailing thought out there. Depends on the culture and the trust level that
Yeah,
exists in a company. That's a huge factor. The other is the resources that it takes to do one. Okay, if you put it on the HR department, they're usually pretty swamped with things anyway. So those are the two factors. do they have the time and resources internally if it makes sense to do it themselves? But to your point, you want to really up the angle on the reliability and the confidentiality and the trustworthiness of your data. An independent perspective is probably independent approach is probably the better bang for that buck. Now your more frequent ones like the QDC, those usually aren't as comprehensive. They're usually more specific to an issue that's known in the company, maybe or not, depending on what they're trying to do with those types of feedback mechanisms.
And that's normally done internally, right? So
Yeah,
you're not necessarily having those in confidence, anyways.
yeah.
Let me ask you this. Okay, so 30,000 foot view, we know that you're helping people identify issues, and you're getting the information through these surveys that you put together in tandem or in collaboration with the business owner. But then you will put out the survey and you get the results. Now, how does it, again, let's just go 30,000 foot view. We're going to drill down, but how do you then take those results and help the owners improve? Let's start with the morale, I guess, of the overall workforce, because I mean a happy workforce is going to be more productive, I would assume.
Right.
So we'll start there, and then we'll move over into talent optimization, like how can they identify they've got people in the wrong seats and things like that.
Yeah. That when you do the survey and you get the data, like I said, just my eyes light up. You have all these questions, and you get the ones that score higher or lower, what percent favorability, what percents disagree, whatever your scale is. We always use first we establish a business and internal benchmark with that company. So you take all of the questions and you say, okay, here's what the company as a whole is.
Mm-hmm.
And on question A, it's X percent, so forth and so on down the line. So from there, you can see at a strategic level where your high points are and where your low points are. So
Yeah.
where you doing well, where might there be some opportunities. So that's at the strategic level. But where really the more important, well, it's equally important, but probably more impact is done as you drill down through the organization and let's take the department you mentioned a while ago. They've got 10 people in there, 12 people. They get their set and you can compare them against the company benchmark and say, okay, we're X points above, we're X points below. Here's some things that we feel could make a difference. And then at that point, it's kind of up to company to put in the effort to do the action following that. And that usually entails the manager sitting down with his team and saying, okay, here's how we line up against our peers elsewhere in the company.
Yeah.
Let's talk about why, because the data will tell you a lot of the what's, what are the issues.
It doesn't get to the heart of what.
You got to have those conversations with somebody, either as a team or you bring in a facilitator with a task force that can out why. And if you figure the why out, you're going to be a whole lot more effective in attacking that issue.
Well, but now, okay, so, and we'll just take this forward. You have this initial survey, these results. That's where you start to do future surveys and compare, and then you can see how you're tracking, right? You're making progress, or you're slipping backwards, or whatever.
Yeah,
So,
whatever period that makes sense. Usually the next year. I think some people jump the gun and might go too early because if you find an opportunity to build something or change something in the business that does really have a positive impact, it's going to take a few months for that to really soak into the hearts and minds of employees, and it's not going to be next week, depending on what it is. So you got to do a check sometime out, 6, 8, 12 months out to see if we really invested effort, either money or time or both, in changing a policy or some sort of practice to build unity, whatever it may be. It's going to be a while before that will filter through into any sort of data.
Yeah, this is marathon. This is marathon, not sprint, for sure.
Definitely long term. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the minutia a little bit of the surveys and some of the things that you see on a regular basis. So when you're doing these surveys, you've been hired by a company. They've identified that they might be at risk or have an issue, and they want to make sure. I'm assuming that's the mentality that most people come in with. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But so they figured out that they do have, at least they're at risk for something, and they want to figure it out and then try to figure out how to handle it. what are some of the common things that you see on a regular basis when you're doing these surveys that, people can just know, like, "Oh, okay, here's some warning signs to look for," but things that you commonly discover in the surveys?
Uh, I guess some of the more common ones have to do with that immediate manager and employee relationship. Okay. I guess
And
that's,
you're talking about friction between the direct supervisor and
well, it may be friction. It may be that supervisor's ability as a leader. Okay. Sometimes if you're in an environment where, like I'll use a manufacturing environment as an example. Today, I'm the line guy working next to you, putting that piece together. For some reason or other, there's a change now. I'm your boss.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Do I know how to be a boss? Okay. Well, I don't know. Okay. Never been one before.
Right.
Hopefully, there's been some prep work and some training, some development effort going on, so that transition happens better, but not always. So as long as
That's
you
common
can,
in sales. Everett, that happens all the time in sales. You take your best sales rep and promote them to be a sales
yeah,
manager. And a lot of people don't like that person because they're jealous. They've been jealous of that person. They've been whipping their butt. That's why they got the promotion. But
yeah,
also, to your point, a lot of times they're not trained. They're really good at that
right,
role, but they're not trained to do the next role. And just because you're a good producer doesn't mean you're a good manager. So
right.
I totally
Well,
get it.
that's probably the more common. The other one has to do with a perception of leadership. Maybe the C-suite is so remote that I just really can't relate to them, and when I hear them talk about the strategy, it may not resonate with me in my heart if I'm way down the line.
Mm,
Communication is another big one. Okay, and that's defined differently in different companies. But that communication all up and down the hierarchy is always, often is one of the most low hanging fruit ones out there.
yeah.
Yeah, because people just don't
Really?
know, or you don't communicate, you don't talk, and if you don't talk, then people assume, and what happens from there. So
Yeah,
that's probably
absolutely.
another one that's probably the more frequent that we see as a driver of a disengagement influence or something that might cause an employee to disconnect. Interesting, compensation is always an issue.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think I've ever done a survey where it said I'm being paid too much. Okay,
Has anybody ever answered that question? Yes, I get paid too much. Yes.
and
No.
it is always one of the lower scoring components, depending regardless of how you ask it. But you have to ask it so you know. But it's not one of the drivers. Okay, it's probably fourth or fifth down the line when it comes to a decision of whether to stay or join a company. So there's other factors that play into that mindset of the employee that weigh heavily, have more impact on their choice. Okay, so
All right. So we've got some good ideas here now. Management issues, communication issues, pay issues, cultural issues that come up from things like I talked about, mergers and acquisitions where you have rivalries. There can be all kinds of things that happen there. How does IRI then take the data once the data has been collected and you've had a chance to analyze it? How do you then present that to the owner, and what do you do to help them, with potential resolutions to their issues? How does that work?
well, there's all sorts of toys and tools analytically where we can break it down, we prioritize issues. Then we coordinate with them on how far down the hierarchy do they want to push the accountability for action planning. Okay, so do you go down to the line manager? Do you go that far down, or you do a little higher up? Depending on their organization, it can go either way. But our recommendation is whoever is accountable or closest to the issue that might be on the table, that's probably where your action planning needs to take place. Now, we have a series of best practices, a library of best practices that you can apply, or at least read about different, more common issues. And occasionally, our clients will even invite us in to host task force, facilitate a task force to dig into the whys. Okay, but ultimately, it's still up to the client to say, okay, yeah, we acknowledge this is an issue. We acknowledge that to our employees, say, yeah, we're aware of it. Thanks for your feedback. And here's what you can expect that you're going to see be done out of over the next
That
6,
action,
12 months like that. So
yeah, that action plan becomes
yeah,
public.
that becomes that whole part of communication again. So yeah.
Yeah. So do you guys help? I mean, are you being paid to help with that process, or are you mainly
Uh,
taking the
mo-
data and presenting the data to them?
Most often our role stops at presenting the information.
Okay.
Okay. So that's where we stop because that's what we're good at. We can
So you're not
explain.
really doing human resources services as much as data collection
Right.
and
Yeah, there's a
analytics.
whole world of HR out there that we
Yeah.
don't delve in. Okay, it's not our expertise.
No, I got you, and that's what's funny because I've talked to people in HR and I've talked to people in recruiting, but you're kind of in this middle space where it's like you're helping them deal with the employees that they've already got.
Right.
So I like that. We've got a scenario here by Brady. This is it sounds like somebody's going to need some communication assistance here, but he says we got a new policy change an hour ago without a town hall about vaccine mandates by OSHA starting January 4th. Vaccination I don't think it's complete sentence here, Brady, but on vaccinated needs to have weekly testing paid. I think what he's saying is unvaccinated employees are going to need to start doing a weekly test to prove that they don't have COVID. That's going to be kind of a pain in the butt. It sounds like they're saying you don't have to be vaccinated, but here's this new step that you have to take weekly to come to work. That's going to be probably not really popular with. I don't know
Yeah.
how many people in his company are unvaccinated, but that's probably
Uh,
there's going to
yeah.
be people. There's going to be people who probably choose to get vaccinated. There's going to be probably some people who are not vaccinated because let's face it. If you're not vaccinated at this point, you're probably not going to, right? You for
I'm
whatever
not
reason
gonna
decide
do
you're
it.
not
Yeah.
going to get it. So there are probably going to be some people who say, "See you later." I would assume they're not going to
Yeah.
want to do that.
Now that's a that's there's been a lot about that in the news lately. It's that the fallout of all that's I think still to come. So
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
see
It's
where all that ends up. Yeah.
But that is the kind of thing that can create a mess that we're talking
Yep.
about here. You know,
Hmm.
forget the subject COVID. I know COVID can be, one of those things that people want to fight about because it's been politically charged. So let's diffuse that bomb. It could be about anything, but anything
Yeah.
like that where you have a policy that's rolled out, it wasn't a policy and now it is a policy and it affects your employees, that can create these nightmare scenarios that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
The residuals from that 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, down the road is going to be maybe some unhappy folks.
Probably at least one.
At
Okay.
least one. Yeah, at least one. Right.
Exactly. So they're
But
fine.
when you're talking about an organization where you have, hundreds of employees or thousands of employees, you cannot, as an employer, make everybody happy. That's just impossible, right? But the goal is to keep the bulk of the people happy and the communication between the majorities. Every barrel of apples is going to have some bad apples, and you just tell them to go find a new barrel. But
Yeah, we're all human.
yeah,
Sometimes it fits everybody, sometimes it doesn't. But that's kind of what we try and help them do. Um, if I want to move a little further into talent optimization, if we can go there next.
yeah, let's do it. So I'm going to pull up your website. I'm going to pull up your website, and while you talk, if you want me to go anywhere, just let me know. We've got
Uh,
IRI Consulting, and we've got this performance success engagement going around in a circle here, which is really
they're all related, so then they feed off of each other. And talent optimization, let me talk about that for a bit. The employee surveys that we've been doing, that's the evidence or the indication of all the good, bad, and ugly decisions management makes. Okay.
yep.
So it's kind of like the back end. So we get it after the fact. Sometimes it's helpful in preempting things down the future if you can drill that out of the data. But the other data that I'm getting into now is I think I mentioned when we crossed paths before. If you can get things right on the front end as much as possible, regardless of what you're doing. I grew up farming. If you do things right front, there's no accidents on the back end. Okay.
Right.
If you plan it as best you can on the front end, downstream issues are, either minimized or not as, ugly, if you want to use that term. So
An ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cures.
there you go. And I happened to run across another method that kind of speaks to my data passion is if I can get with my clients and say, okay, on the front end, if you can get your people wired in to the best role that they fit, the results that I get for you on a back end survey are always going to look a little bit better. Okay. Both in terms of employee experience, retention, all the typical KPIs that are out there that people follow. So what we're now doing is rolling out, a service to do more behavioral sciences and integrating that into our consulting. Okay. To where we can get more into the head and hearts of the employees.
Is this the Myers-Briggs that you're talking about here?
Well, that's one of the tools. That's not the one I'm using now. I've used that on occasion, but this one is different.
Okay.
I wish I'd known about this other one about 25 years ago. Okay.
All right.
Okay. But another piece of proprietary software. Myers-Briggs is good. It'll take you certain ways in certain directions. But we've run across one that is so comprehensive yet so easy to explain that I think that makes it very powerful and very useful. So what we're trying to do now is help our clients design their people strategy to be more aligned with their business strategy.
So are we talking about in the hiring process then? This is something that you would do in the hiring process for a candidate? Is that what you mean?
Well, it would definitely be part of that, okay, along with other tools that are out there. There's a variety of tools to profile an employee and personality tests, things like that. This one is, I think, a little more robust from my experience on actually deciding where or what role is someone more naturally wired to fit.
Okay. So you could do this to your employees too, then.
Well, that's the most powerful uses is existing employees.
Okay.
Because you can come in and say, okay, here's my team of 6-8 people, and this is how each of them is naturally wired to work. How does the way they work, how is that aligned with what we're asking them to do? So
and even maybe identifying potential managers and leaders,
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, definitely. It can be used all up and down. Definitely part of a recruiting. We don't recommend it be the only factor. Of course, any recruiting process shouldn't be that. It should be a combination of all the information you can get.
Mm-hmm.
But it certainly does give you a better context of who an employee is, either a new one coming in, and what they may need to develop them, some more, some less, depending on experience level or maturity in the industry or whatever. But then you can also take it to the team level and say either a team is changing or someone is going to another role. Who do I replace them with?
Yeah.
Or does my team have a gap in the way they're naturally wired to work versus what we're asking them to do? Do we reassign them into a different role? Do we look in-house for someone who can fill that gap? Or do we go outside? So that is to me, a equally fascinating exercise and decision to make as it is on the back end. How do we, take what our employees are telling us to help bolster up the culture, or help make the culture a place where people want to stay, the job experience as good as it can be. And the end result is we keep our employees longer. Okay.
Now, on this type of, this is a survey as well, different survey than what we were talking about before, but survey nonetheless. That's how you get your data.
That's the data, yeah.
People fill out surveys. But you have, I'm assuming, the same type of libraries where you can go to employers in the conversation stage or consultation stage and say, hey, this is what we would expect to see from this type of survey before the results are done. So they have an expectation before you even give the survey to their staff, right? Is that the idea?
Yeah. We describe what it is. It's a short business, behavioral assessment, standardized. Well, let's say standardized, but it's the same thing for everybody.
Yeah.
It gives that data science, and research has proven out certain behaviors, needs in the individual. So we can say, here's several different profiles of individuals that the data demonstrates, the research shows. and you can align that over with what they're asking them to do and determine whether or not if there's a good fit. I mean, is it a good fit or is it a wide fit? What do we need to bring it back into alignment and things like that? So
Yeah, I mean, because certain roles, obviously, certain roles are going to be predisposed to certain traits or qualities. Maybe the introvert and the creative person, or the person who's more willing to take risks, isn't
right,
necessarily the best person for certain roles. And then you've got the extrovert, or you've got the person who um, is very analytical, or is very much if they're going to play by the book, right, hard and fast
yeah. Hmm.
to the rules of the company. So you have these different personalities, these different qualities, and a role is predisposed to having some people that have these ones and definitely not those ones. So if you're looking
Yeah.
where people are
Well,
seated,
yeah. I think most people, I think all people, if you give them in the right, put them in the right place, most people have the ability to learn.
yeah,
They can understand if they get the right teaching and training. I'll use a simple analogy. If I play golf right-handed, but I would be very bad with a left-handed set, okay, and that would cause me a lot of stress. So if you're asking someone to do a job that they're not, and they may not even know they're naturally wired for that. I discovered something about myself when I took this a couple of years ago. I thought, oh, so that's why I'm 10 years behind in my business development because I'm not a good salesman.
I don't think
I'm not wired for that. I kind of knew that subconsciously, but now I have
yeah,
data to prove it. Okay. So, over time, if you're asking someone to stretch them outside their comfort zone in terms of what they're being done, what they're asked to do, or the dynamics of the environment, whatever the situation may be, it will eventually wear someone down. Whereas on the other hand, someone who, one of my employees, she thrives. It just makes her real. It energizes her to do repetitive stuff. It's the same, very
yeah.
repetitive, very structured, and that
Comfort,
energizes her.
comfort in the structure. Yeah.
Yeah, where other people, yeah, I got to do it, but it doesn't really energize me. So it's
Well,
a
that's it. I mean,
fascinating.
that's a good example right there. You have a line worker who, like they insert this part and then it goes down and it's the same thing, and they do that 8 hours a day, 5 hours, 5 days a week, and they
Hmm.
love it because that's their mentality. For me, I would fall asleep after about 15 minutes, and I would get fired very quickly from that kind of
Yeah,
job.
and
So
most of us don't know that how we're wired, and we kind of know what we feel, and we know what stresses us, and we know what
yeah,
energizes us. But when you can get that in advance and at least get a profile or a picture of how someone is wired to work, it certainly helps in the talent management decision process. It brings more objectivity to that process. Yeah, you got to look at resumes. You need to look at other testing that might be, appropriate for the job or the role. All those pieces of information. But the whole idea, and one thing I've always wanted to do since I became a data geek, is take as much subjectivity out of a decision equation as you can. Chances are it's going to be a better decision. It's going to be a more, productive outcome from that decision process. So that's what we do.
yeah, and so those surveys obviously are not anonymous. Those are, tied directly, so that are they sharing, in most cases, are they sharing those results with the employee after they take the test to say, here's how you did, or
Well, there's definitely a sharing going on. There should be because the employee, and that's what we do. We'll do one of those assessments, then we'll sit down and go through it with them and say, okay, here is. We don't want to say here's how you tick, okay, but that's basically what I was saying. And here's how
yeah,
you
that's
tick.
basically what you're saying. These are things you're predisposed to, and these are things you don't like, and yeah,
And most of the time, every conversation I have, this guy, oh boy, this is scary accurate. Yeah, I, did.
yeah.
I did one with my wife, okay, and of course
I've had
we've been married a couple of several decades, so I kind of knew all that. But now it's like, okay,
I've done
no,
Myers and Briggs. I've had somebody give me that test
uh,
before, and then there was another one that someone did, and both times I was like, wow, you guys
yeah,
have you guys have nailed me there. And there was some surprises for me too, like, oh, I never really thought about that, but yeah,
yeah.
that's like
The whole one of the biggest benefits, aside from the data and how you can use it, is self awareness.
yeah,
Okay, so if I'm more self aware of how I operate, then that helps me be better productive. But even more importantly, if I can be more self-aware of those around me, then you have a better chance of reducing conflict and friction. You have a greater chance of better productivity, and that's what this other approach, this other solution that we have is intended to do, to help build that productivity in a way to where it's not just putting someone in a seat because they fog a mirror, but you put them in a seat because they are the right person for that kind of job you're at, or as close as possible. You're never going to be a perfect fit. Well, I can't say never, but chances are
Yeah.
you're going to be close enough to where they can grow into that job, they can be developed, and it can be a long-term contribution to the
But
company.
that's the point, right? Statistically, now you have more confidence that they are going to be happier, and you're optimizing your talent as opposed to wasting investing time in somebody who's never, according to the data, going to be fulfilled in that role, and
Right.
they're going to eventually leave, and you're going to have to start over. So why start the process with the person who's, according to the data, not likely going to be happy? It would be
Right.
better to
Mhm.
find a natural fit where, you got a chance to not only keep them happy for now, but keep them happy for the long term. So
Right. Yeah.
I can't believe it, but we're out of time already.
Yeah.
So if you
I
have
saw
if you
that.
I know, if you have a couple more minutes, I would love to wrap this up if you have time. What I wanna do is I wanna just give you, like, 3 minutes to talk about anything that maybe, because your content better than I do, that you wanted to talk about that we missed, we didn't have a chance, and then I might actually bring you back on at a later date to dig, because I feel we could go another hour easy, but we don't have the time today. But maybe in the future we'll have you back on, Everett, if you.
Sure.
But
No,
maybe just 3 minutes summarize, yeah.
no, I think we covered it all, pretty much all the big issues
Okay,
that
good.
we deal with. So we've talked about the feedback part, which is any company that wants to be the best it can be is going to want to get their employees experience, and that has really blossomed in the last decade with all the tools. It's become easier.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the mechanics of all that, there's different ways to do it. I have I keep saying bruises and scars because things go well, and sometimes you learn something, and in the end, hopefully, I can give our clients a set of reliable data points or insights, I guess is a better way to look at it, that can help them really put some teeth in any follow-up work they do. Okay, so we've covered all the big points. Perhaps a little more on talent optimization. You can go a lot wider with that. You can look at the individual. You can roll it up to a team. Um,
Do
I've
people
got,
do people ever hire you to do these assessments for just a department and not the whole company? Like, maybe they're having a headache or a lot of turnover in a department and they just want to get to the bottom of that. Do they come to you and say, "Hey, will you do this assessment for 20 people in this department," or something like that? Because I know you were talking about 100 or more people for the other one, but
well, occasionally they will, but in that sense, we probably won't do a survey in the traditional sense. We'll probably come in and sit down individually. We will.
yeah,
We'll do what we call a sensing exercise, where we'll have a set of guideline questions we'll ask, but it's more a one-on-one process. Try to do it in a way that they are safe and feel comfortable answering. So that happens. It's rare, but it can be done. It's gets to the specific issue that they know that they're dealing with. But we've done a few of those, and the outcomes have been good. They've been helpful. But a lot of it also depends on the culture of the company, if that would be really a wise approach to
yeah,
the issue that they're structuring. So, no, I think we've covered the high points that IRI does
yeah.
fairly well. I'll be happy to answer any other questions any other time. And if you want to go deeper, I guess action planning is the one that we didn't talk a lot about because, it's so unique to each company.
Right,
Yeah,
right. I'm the
it's
same.
like
Yeah.
you don't know we can do it, but they know their people better than we do. We can support it. We can give
Well, once you
guidance, but
once you have the data at your fingertips, the action plan should become I would think, relatively obvious anyways. At least you know what you need to work on. But I
yeah,
do want to make sure before we go, just again, for anybody who's hopped on late, or maybe you're watching this after the fact, if you want more information about IRI Consulting, go to iriconsulting.com. You can also find IRI Consulting on LinkedIn, and I put the link to that in the comments so you can find that. And if you want to connect with Everett, He is on LinkedIn as well. This is what his current profile and cover photos look like, so you can find him. Everet. Am I saying Bluth right? Is that the right way to say it?
Bluth.
Bluth. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like Ruth Bluth. Yeah.
I can butcher English all kinds of ways. So there you go. Everet Bluth. All right, Everet, thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining the show. I think it's been very informative, and this is not a topic that we've ever talked about on this show before. So if you're watching Marketing Monday for the first time, this is what we do. We bring on business owners and we talk about real world, scenarios and how they're using marketing data. And this wasn't so much advertising to prospects as it is more trying to delve inside the other side of our client base, which is our employees, and make sure they're happy too. So Everet, thanks for joining. If you guys are curious, I am on every Monday. Marketing Mondays happens every Monday. It starts at 11 a.m. Pacific time. That's 2 p.m. Eastern, or you can adjust the time for wherever you are. We'll be back next week. Have a great week, everybody. Everet, thanks again for joining.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. See you later.
Bye.
BowmanDigitalMedia.com.